Hi there, listener. This is episode 75 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. This edition should be of eminent interest to any fans of Czech cinema, as my guest is Michal Bregant, director of the country's National Film Archive. The NFA is currently celebrating the 80th anniversary of its foundation, and to find out all about its past and present, I spoke to Michal Bregant at its offices in Outer Žižkov for this edition of Prague Talk. The National Film Archive was created in 1943, or it opened its doors in 1943. Why was an institution like this initiated during World War II?
There were two reasons, basically. One was the occupying forces, the Nazis, wanted to have order in everything, including the film industry. And they were exploring the capacity and the knowledge and the professional level of the Czech filmmakers in Barrandov so much that they really believe that film industry is something very rich and promising for the future. So they also wanted to have the control over the film heritage in a way. But on the other hand, there were many people who were collecting films and the cinema owners who were afraid that during the war their films could be damaged. So there was some sort of a collector's passion, and the bureaucratic attitude what created the film archive back in 1943.
I was quite surprised to discover recently that the Czech film industry was nationalized in August 1945, so just 3 months after the end of the war. I had assumed it was done by the communists a few years later. Why did that happen under Beneš?
Well, that was the first nationalization decree ever signed by the president in 1945, and that could happen only because of the will of the Czech filmmakers and writers, intellectuals, who were thinking about the form and format of the Czech film industry after the war. And they started preparing that already during the war. And Vladislav Vančura, for example, was also involved in that, and other people who were not allowed to work or didn't want to work during the occupation. And they were thinking about what would be the most efficient way of organizing the whole film industry in such a small country. And they were kind of planning for the future. They knew that there was a rich history of the film industry, but they knew that after the war there will be a completely different market for Czech films. So they wanted to find out the ideal kind of structure for the support of filmmaking from the side of the state or the government.
The National Film Archive today possesses 150 million meters of film, 500,000 plus photos, and lots of other things. What are some of your most valuable items here at the National Film Archive?
Well, some of the items in our collection have the status of the national archival value, so we have to take more care about them, which is just rather a bureaucratic thing. But as archivists, we cannot really say what is more and what is less valuable. There are some standards of care which have to be taken for each and every item in the collection, but obviously the oldest materials, which are the original negatives and prints of Jan Křižanecký, who was the pioneer of filmmaking in Bohemia back in 1890s. This is something that is really unique because you don't have those materials preserved in many other archives.
And are you able to say roughly what percentage of Czech films made over all those decades have been preserved?
We should look at the timeline, and we can say that until the end of the silent era, in the end of the 1920s, we have basically more than half of the overall production, which is a huge percentage compared to the other kind of national film heritages. But since the 1930s, since the beginning of the sound era, we basically have like 98% of the overall production in Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic.
What would you say have been some of the major milestones in the history of your institution?
Over the time, the Film Archive, as other memory institutions, always kind of reacted to the situation in the society, to the political realities of the time. So our predecessors had to kind of respond somehow to the challenges. Like back in the 1950s, the authorities discovered that there were too many American films in the collection, so they wanted to destroy them. And that never happened, because the archivists are not only gatekeepers, they also feel the responsibility for the kind of coherence of the collection. And then later, during the normalization in the 1970s, there was also the responsibility of the archivists to hide and then preserve the so-called blacklisted or forbidden films. Some of them were even supposed to be destroyed physically, and that never happened, you know. So after 1990, it was possible to really release those films again, or release them for the first time, even films which were not completed in 1969, let's say. And nowadays, the challenges are not ideological, obviously, but we have to keep up with the technology. And nowadays, the whole film industry has been is digital, so we need to be very careful about maintaining the digital data, which is growing very quickly. And in regard to the public, we want to open the collection as much as possible and make it available and to lower the threshold.
The NFA does a lot of work on the restoration of films. Also, I know some years ago, maybe about, 8 years ago, there was a big debate about how restoration should be done. Is that still an issue, or has your side won?
What we were saying from the beginning, there is not the only correct method or way how to restore films. There are many of them, and we have to think also about the digital and photochemical restorations. Those are parallel methods which exist everywhere among the archives. So yes, there is the whole variety of approaches, and the idea or philosophy, if you wish, is that we need to preserve the original material, the original film elements for the future, because we can never say that our method is the best. So we have to make them available for the future generations to get back to those elements. And what we want is to make the classical films available in a form which is as much similar to the original form as possible.
I don't know if there would have been many cases of living directors who saw their films restored, but there definitely have been some, like, for example, Ivan Passer. What has been their reaction to seeing their movies restored?
Those reactions are very, very diverse. There were directors who were not satisfied with the result because they wanted to touch their own films again. A director or cinematographer, they feel that it's kind of their child, so they want to touch it again and maybe make some improvements or changes, and they not really understand that those films were produced by the state, and that now it's still the property of the state, and that we are only taking care of those films. And also, it's our responsibility not to falsify the history. So this is why we need to be faithful to how films looked in the past. Then we have many directors and film makers, cinematographers who are very happy that we are digitizing and restoring their films, which means that their films will be available in cinemas, on TV screens, or any screen, and online.
It seems quite often that some major international film festival is premiering a restored classic Czech film. Is that work of restoring those films the thing that makes your organization most visible?
That's correct. It was one of the first challenges when I started working for the National Film Archive. That year, basically, the Venice Film Festival started for the first time this kind of Klasici section, and they wanted something from us. So that was very quick, partly improvised, but the result was very good. And since 2012, we've been each year at least one of the major international film festivals, be it Cannes, Berlinale, or Venice, and other places. We are at specialized festivals like in Lyon, France, in Paris, and other places. It's kind of a double thing that we basically remind the international audiences that Czech cinema existed and exists, so we can be kind of context for the new films which are coming from this country to the international market. And for the Národní filmový archiv as an institution is the best way how to, maybe heat up the debate about presentation and also this valorization, as it is called mainly in French, of the classical films.
I also wanted to ask you about the simple preservation of films and how that works. For example, last year there were 30 or 40 films released in this country. Are they immediately preserved? Is there a delay? Is there a selection process?
There is no selection, fortunately. In legislation, it's very clear, and all the producers are used to it, and we communicate with them very smoothly. They basically send now the files, not film material, but the digital files, and we keep them in our database as the data, and in our servers as what one would usually call the content. And those are kept. We are not getting the rights with those films, but we keep the films as such, and it's for the future how the films from today might be explored.
And what are the criteria for what makes a film? Does a movie have to have a cinema release to be considered a film?
Yes, that's also in the law that the cinematic release is a condition for an audiovisual work to be considered an audiovisual film work. But we are really kind of broadening our scope, and now we are already archiving also the video art or the art of the moving image. Now we are at the beginning of a long research project focused on the video games. So this is also something that is at our horizon, and we need to figure out what are the optimal methods of archiving the video games, which are also a audiovisual work of its own kind.
The NFA is currently celebrating 80 years. How exactly are you celebrating?
It's not big because there are anniversaries, each 10 years or each 5 years. But we basically celebrate first by continuing the work, second by moving from the place in Žižkov where we are sitting now to another temporary place, because we still have the project for moving the Národní filmový archiv to the Žižkov cargo train station.
Well, I should say now we're very near the Žižkov cargo train station, and the building we're in looks pretty old school.
It's very old school. It's older than silent films, actually, and it's not possible to stay here any longer. So I'm very happy that the Minister of Culture agreed that we have to move out from here before we move back to Žižkov to this cargo train station. So that's also some sort of a celebration in a way. And on our website, people can find the selection of 8 items from our collection, which show basically the diversity of the collection, and also the people who are involved in preservation and presentation of those.
Many thanks indeed to Michal Bregant, who I spoke to at the start of June 2023 as the National Film Archive marked 80 years of existence. The NFA does extremely valuable work, and I wish them smooth sailing through the decades ahead. This has been episode 75 of Prague Talk, so guess what? There are loads more editions out there for your delectation. Why not give some of them a listen and sign up wherever you get your podcasts? But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.